Chapter 13. Snoop Camera. Joe gave his brother a puzzled look, at first seeing no connection between Chet's remark and Jack Wayne's interrupted radio message. What do you mean, Frank? Look, we've been assuming all along that when Jack said tiger's bite, he meant the kind of biting left on with teeth. Joe exclaimed. I get it. You think he was talking about the kind of bite spelled B-I-G-H-T. Exactly. You mean the message had something to do with the Roper line? Chet asked blankly. Frank shook his head. No, that wouldn't make sense. But remember, bite can also mean a sort of bay or indention in the coastline. In other words, Tiger's Bite is the name of a place. Joe snapped his fingers excitedly. Sure, Tiger's Bite could be the name of the place Jack was heading when we saw him fly south. Have you fellows ever heard of that name before? Frank asked. Chet shrugged his beefy shoulders. Not me. Joe also had to admit the name was new to him, but Tony frowned thoughtfully. That rings a bell. I have a hunch I've heard it. Where? I don't know. But if you're right, it might be some place against the coast. Maybe I've been there on the Napoli. Why don't we look at a map? Tony opened the boat in the locker and took out a sailing chart of the Barmouth Bay area. He and Chet then climbing onto the dock, and the boys spread out on the chart. After poring over it for several minutes, they could find no such name as Tiger's Bite. Another clue conked out. Let's not give up so soon. Maybe it's not important to show on the map, or maybe the name's not official. Why don't you ask old Clem's Diggin'? That's an idea. You certainly know if anyone would. Daggett was a retired seafaring man who operated a ferry service to Rocky Isle in Barmouth Bay. Frank glanced at his wristwatch. Claims to be here to pick up any more passengers before 1:30. Let's go home and have lunch, Joe, and we can stop by later and ask him. Okay, I could show you some cow. Each of the boys ate 2 hamburgers and a generous portion of fried French potatoes. They were just finishing helpings of Aunt Gertrude's old-fashioned strawberry shortcake when the telephone rang. Tom Lester was calling from the airport. Aunt Lester just showed up. If you want to talk to him, now's a chance. Where can we find him? Right now he's in the hangar checking in with the plane. He has a bug nose and is wearing his hair and long sideburns. You can't miss him. Okay, thanks, Tom. It's not 1 o'clock yet. Let's whip out into the airport where we see Clem's Diggin'. Suits me. And say, why don't I take my news camera along to snap Harris' picture? Dad might recognize him. Good idea. Joe had recently bought an ultra-miniature camera from money he had saved. That could be attached to his label for taking secret photographs. Both boys slipped on sports jackets to allay suspicions on Joe's maneuver. A short time later, they pulled into the airport parking lot and headed for Harris' hangar. The door was open, and inside they could see a big twin-engine amphibian plane, but the pilot was not in sight. The boys walked cautiously into the hangar to look around for him, and Joe shot an inquisitive glance at the airplane's cabin, but the fuselage was too high for a full inside view. He climbed up and noticed a folded navigation chart with penciled marking clipped above the pilot's seat. Hey, Frank! I see a chart of the Bayport's close area, and it has some markings on it, Joe warned. Watch it, Joe. Here comes him now. A man who answered Tom Lester's description of Harris was striding toward into the hangar. Joe quickly unhooked his label camera and held it up, snapped a picture of the map, then he jumped down. What are you 2 punks doing here? The pilot yelled, charging into the hangar almost as if a run. Joe calmly snapped Harris' picture, then slipped the camera into the sport coat picture pocket. Then, the pilot, livid with rage, tried to hurl Frank aside and get at Joe. Instead, Frank met an attack. He spun him around with a judo grip and followed with a punch to the jaw that landed the man on the floor. Herb sat up, blinked in surprise. Frank repressed a grin. If you want me to step out of the way, just ask politely. Herb got to his feet, scowling. Alright, wise guys. Suppose I call the cops. Go ahead. The hangar was open, so we just walked in to say hello. Didn't touch a thing. And when the police here, maybe we can chat about the Tiger's Bite. The mark was shot in the dark. Joe had hoped it might startle higher for provoked some interesting reaction, but the effect was not at all the portion of what Joe expected. Harry's face paled, and all of a sudden the bluster seemed to go out of him. I don't know what you're talking about, Mr. Hire fluttered. Oh, I'm sorry, I lost my temper. I thought maybe you kids had sneaked up in here to shoot the plane or something. Now, go on. Now, scram and we'll forget all about it. Sure, if that's the way you want it, Frank turned to his brother. Come on. Joe could not resist in a parting taunt. If you change your mind about calling the police, they can find us at the boat dock. Both boys could feel Al Harriff's eyes burning into their backs as they walked towards the parking lot. Driving away, Frank remarked, Boy, you sure struck gold that time, but I hope it wasn't by mistake telling up our next move. I doubt if the gang would try any dirty work in broad daylight. Anyhow, if they do, so much better. That's one way to draw them into the open. At the boat dock, a few passengers had already boarded into the Sandpiper, but Clam's docket was leaning against the bollard, smoking his corncob pipe, apparently in no hurry to shove off, and he greeted the Hardys at the dawn. Hey, you lads, here's the detective business. Booming. Well, maybe you can help us. Have you ever heard of a place called Tiger's Bite? Sure, down south of the bite. I once lost an anchor there. The Hardys became excited. We couldn't find it on the map. I ain't surprised, taking the pipe out of his mouth. That's just a nickname. About 20 years ago, there was a couple of attacks on the summers by tiger sharks, and they come into the bite. So folks thereabouts started calling it Tiger's Bite. No one goes there much anymore. We're guessing it now. Frank took out a pencil and a scrap of paper and asked Daggett if he could draw a map so Joe could find the place, and the old fireman obliged. The Hardys thanked him and started to go back to the convertible, which they had parked in a vacant lot on the opposite side of the road. As the two boys passed the roadside stand facing the road, Joe let out a startled yelp. Frank, look! Their car door was open and a man was pawing through the glove compartment. Frank and Joe started to dart across the road, but had to pause for a break in traffic. The man glanced around warily and saw them, and immediately fled through the lot. By the time the Hardys had crossed the road, he was leaping into a waiting sedan and sped off with a roar. Let's go! Rushing toward the convertible. He slid behind the wheel and Joe slipped in beside him. Frank rolled the car around instead of bumping and bouncing across the lot, then shot out into the road. The chase continued for over a mile with the sedan clearly in view. Then the Hardys saw a turn off to the right. Moments later, the convertible reached the same spot and Frank swung the wheel. The car took the turn with a screech of rubber. They were now a winding dirt lane with woods on both sides, and the sedan was out of sight. The convertible suddenly spun out of control. Frank jammed on the brakes and seesawed at the wheel and managed to bring it to some lurching stop just before it crashed into some trees. Whew! Joe let out a gasp of relief. Somewhat pale and shaken, the boys climbed out to survey the damage. Left front tire's flat, and that's what did it. Joe pointed to a wicked-looking array of tracks, bent nails, and broken glass scattered across the lane. Those crooks must have tossed the stuff out of the car before it turned into a lane. Disgusted, the boys took a jack out of their truck and set about changing the flat tire. Suddenly, a small object flew spinning from the trees across the lane. It landed near the convertible and sent up a gush of purple smoke. Frank stiffened an anchor. Look out, Joe! He warned. We're being attacked! 3 men wearing gas masks had burst out of the woods and were charging toward the boys. Okay, this one is really bad. I really can't wait to find out what happens in Chapter 14. See you soon.